Welcome to Retail Retold, the stories behind how that store landed in your neighborhood. I'm Chris Ressa, in conversation with the people and stories shaping retail and real estate. Brought to you by DLC. Happy New Year and welcome to Retail Retold. I'm your host, Chris Ressa, and thank you for joining me today. Let me run that again. Happy New Year and welcome to Retail Retold, everyone. I'm your host, Chris Ressa. Thank you for joining me today. Hope everyone had a great holiday season. Mine was fantastic. Excuse me. I actually unplugged a little bit, which it's been some time since I did that. I got some work done. I probably over the week between Christmas and New Year's sent, 125 emails. Here's the thing. I didn't send any of, and those are emails to outside of the company. So those are emails to either clients, vendors, deals that are working. And what I did was, unless it was urgent, which there wasn't much urgent, we had done a pretty good job of, closing before year end and closing before Christmas. I got to tell you that on that note, it's one of the biggest reliefs ever. Normally, like between Christmas and New Year's, at least on, my side of the business where we're racing, we got a lot closed before Christmas, which I feel like there's usually the spillover after. So there wasn't this year as much. There's some, but they weren't ready to sign anyway. They're going to have to get signed in January, February. So that was weird. Anyway, I digress. What I did was I set the emails that I was sending. I mean, there's like 125 emails, delayed delivery to go out between 7:30 and 8:30 a.m. this morning. Since they weren't urgent, I thought last week they wouldn't get a lot of attention. And I figured being top of mind, first email this morning, so I'll get more attention. Now, a lot of those emails are action-oriented emails. So they're requiring, like, they're emails about setting up a future meeting. So I had to message my assistant and say, hey, listen, I don't want you to get concerned that you missed anything, because on Monday or Tuesday morning, you're going to get about 150 emails that you're copied on about setting meetings. It's because I delayed to read all of these. So I'm very curious when she gets in, when she opens her inbox, how she's going to react to that. Anyway, on to the next. So every year I talk about that I learn a new skill, or I try to learn, maybe the wrong word, maybe improve at a skill. And normally those skills are business professional skills. I've told everyone I've hired a voice coach before. I've hired a copywriting coach, social media coach. So I think it's pretty important to just keep improving your skills. These are outside of goals, in my opinion, right? You have goals like how much, what you want to do about your health, what you want to do about your financial situation, what you want to do from a career perspective. This to me is different. This is a skill that helps all of that. Well, I started thinking about it, and I have one that I think I'm negotiating a deal with the person who would be a coach in this scenario. But so I have one that I'm working on that's business professional. I think by the end of January, I will probably be starting that, enhancing that skill. But one thing that in my network, I've been talking to people about is improving a skill outside of the business profession world. And that could be physical, like golf, right? Or something, anything. But how much effort should you put in that if you're laser focused on your career? And someone, I sat down with who's very successful was like, I think it's time for you to really think about a skill improvement outside of your career because it will actually indirectly help your career. And I was like, I don't know. So, but I've been thinking about this, right? I would tell you, I start thinking about my next year's skill in the summer of the prior year. So probably July, August of 23, I started thinking about what am I going to do in 2024. So, and this summer I will do the same. Anyway, one of my hobbies that many, a little bit inside me, you may or may not know, is I'm a pretty avid sports cards collector. So I collected sports cards when I was a younger kid. And then I kind of went on a hiatus. And then I started back up again about a year and a half, 2 years prior to COVID. So 2018-ish, 2019. And by the way, that was the start of the meteor hockey stick growth of the sports card hobby. And I love it. It's a really cool hobby. It's interesting. It's grown so much. I can't believe how big it is now, the sports cards hobby. It's fascinating. But and so you have some wins and losses, right? And it's very correlated to how sports players are playing. And I think that's obvious, but it's super correlated. So there's a lot of timing involved and you got to know the comps. But typically there's this thing called grading. And typically a card that's graded well is better than a card that's not graded well. And so, but it's like this, you send it to a grading agency. It's like, think of like S&P or Moody's, the grading agency for sports cards, PSA. That said, the graded cards are much more valuable than the non-graded cards, even the same card, as long as it grades well. And a 10 would be well. They call that gem mid card. So why am I talking about sports cards? I'm talking about sports cards is because last year, at the end of last year, I signed up for a class to learn how to grade sports cards. I said learn how to grade, how to look at a sports card and be able to have a better indication if it will grade well if you send it off. So when you're buying sports cards to really understand the condition. And this was a class I took and a skill I was learning since I'm in the sports card hobby. Now, if you think about it, you're looking at a sports car and you might be looking under a microscope, right? Well, this is a highly detailed skill. I'm a run, make business move, make business happen type of person, really type A personality, go, 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 go. And sometimes I'll leave details out or I'll miss a detail. I'm not the highest detail oriented person. I have a lot of other skills. That's not one of them. So this is very hard for me, right? This is very hard for me. But it's been interesting and fascinating. As I went to one card show over the Christmas holidays. And so I was trying to use this skill and looking at cards. Very hard for me, but it doesn't matter whether it's cooking. It doesn't matter if it's surfing, golf, whatever. Spending time in learning a new skill, or it could be something business professional, is something everybody should do. And it's really been super helpful for me over the years. I recommend it to you in the new year. Find a skill. As I said, stay tuned the end of this month. There's a business professional skill that I'm working on. Hopefully I can lock down a deal. I'll tell everybody what that is. I've talked about it a little bit on the podcast before, but I'm sure you will enjoy it. Okay. So let's talk some retail real estate. This is going to be a quick hitter episode. It's not about a store. It's about a bunch of deals around stores that I find interesting. And I say interesting because as we're acquiring centers, I'm learning what I'm about to talk about. It's not always done other places. And there's a gap in a deal if it's not done. And that is something called possession contingency. Now I'm releasing a newsletter. Stay tuned. Once a month, that the first newsletter is going to speak about this possession contingency concept. But possession contingency is when I sign a lease with someone for space A, and the deal, the lease with that person, let's call them tenant, toy store, sign a lease with the toy store, and for space A, but space A is occupied by someone else. So my lease with the toy store, we would put in there, is contingent on us getting possession from the existing tenant in space A. Now, let's back that up. That makes sense on the surface. Now, let me. Is that necessary if the following conditions exist? Toy store. I sign a lease with the toy store. My delivery date, I have to deliver to the toy store July 1st, 2024. Okay? Delivery date, July 1st, 2024. Everyone's got that. Now, existing tenant in this space, lease expires January 31st, 2024. I'm signing the lease with the toy store November 2023. So I signed the lease November 23 to deliver July 24. And there is a tenant in that space until January 31st, 2024. The question becomes, do I need to have a possession contingency with the toy store? Which means the following. The provision would say something to the effect of, this deal is contingent on the landlord getting possession from the existing tenant in the space within, call it 180 days from lease signing. So I signed the lease in November. I have to get possession from the tenant in the space by April, something like that. I don't have to deliver to the toy store until November anyway. So why would that be necessary? That would be necessary because everyone forgets, while the person or the person's, the business in the space A right now, their lease expires January 31st. But what if they don't leave? Regardless of their lease, what if they don't leave? Well, now as a landlord, I'm in a pickle, right? Because I got a tenant in this space, but I've signed an agreement that gives this toy store the right to that space, but I don't have physical possession. And that tenant probably has a holdover provision where probably they're allowed to stay month to month until I give them notice to leave. But even if I do that, what if I give them notice to leave and they don't? They just don't. And now I have to go through the court process and evict them. I might miss depending on which state this is in, I could miss my November delivery date. My out with the toy store, or not out, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, is this possession contingency. And I mentioned, we look at acquiring a lot of shopping centers where there's a tenant going into a space. And sometimes we're acquiring a shopping center where there's a tenant going into a space, and in that space is an existing tenant. And this possession contingency doesn't always exist in leases. So there's a gap. There's room for something to go awry. So I I put that out there. There's going to be an enhanced story about a true story about this going out in my newsletter this week. First time newsletter. I think everyone will like it. But and it revolves around this possession contingency. Does the landlord need it? Should the toy store get it? Isn't it good for the toy store too? Who I say toy store in this example is was toy store. So anyway, think about that possession contingency. Is it necessary? Do you have it in all your agreements? If not, should you? Who knows? With that, I hope everyone had a great new year. Pick up a new skill, everybody. It's good for you. And stay tuned for next week's episode of Retail Resold. Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate you watching. Hit subscribe. See you in the next one.